Right now, I got Johnny Mac, John McMullen, joining me live from the car. Johnny Mac, I believe, is from the cars, joining me right now here on Football 24/7. J Mac, do I got you, brother?
Yeah, you got me?
I got you, man. Sound good, look good, feel good. How you doing, John, as we approach week number 2 here, brother? Day 4 of them on the practice field. Day 4 of you being down at the NovaCare. How you doing on this Monday morning, John?
Yeah, it's going to be a hot one. You can tell
Yeah.
that. So, try to beat the heat a little bit early in the morning. It's going to be mid-90s tomorrow. It's going to be near 100 supposedly. So, they can put the pads on today. I don't think they will, but we'll see when they get down there. Generally, they don't like to come off a day off and put the pads on. So in recent history, it's been that Tuesday after the day off. But the weather could play a part in that. And if it's, if they say, well, it's going to be too hot tomorrow. So to be determined. Some of the players thought it would be Monday. Some thought it would be Tuesday. History says it's going to be Tuesday. But we'll see how that part of it shakes out.
Yeah, John, what changes when they put those pads on? Just for the benefit of the listener to know, for those who might not, obviously a lot changes, from what you can see and from what you can gauge from a practice. But what will change once those pads goes on? What should the viewers and the fans of the show look forward to hearing about when you get those pads on?
Yeah, it becomes more relevant with the offensive and defensive lines, really. That's the physical positions, I like to call them. There's some, back and forth running backs as well. Somebody like A.J. Dillon. It's going to be very interesting to see when the pads come on. From the running standpoint, now they can show up in the passing part of it when it's OTAs or the ramp up in training camp. But so can the receivers and D-backs. But the big guys, man, you don't know until, one of the stories of these early days of camp has been just how impressive Jalix Hunt has been to his teammates and also Moro Ajomo. And those guys are undersized guys who are very athletic for their particular positions. And they show up when it's shorts and no pads. Then when Lane Johnson and Jordan can get a hold of you, or Landon Dickerson, then things can change pretty quickly. Conversely, guys like Jordan Davis that you mentioned, he'll show up when the pads come on. Ty Robinson, hopefully, will show up more as a rookie when the pads come on. So obviously dependent on the player, the position, what type of player they are, but any of the physical positions.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they play football with pads.
Yeah, right. As I was going to say, everybody's got different skill sets, John, but you really want them playing good when there's pads on.
Exactly. So even, you can be physical. A.J. Brown proves it every week. You can be physical as a receiver. You can be physical as a defensive back, which, Cooper DeJean showed last year. So those guys can be physical, but you can also learn something in 7-on-7s and passing camp. I like to call them glorified passing camps, the processing of the quarterbacks, et cetera. You can learn a lot of things at those positions, but you really can't learn anything about the offensive and defensive line until the pads come on.
Yep, so we'll be looking forward to that, Johnny Mac. John, week number 1 is now in the books. They practiced on Saturday. We spoke on Saturday afternoon briefly. I just want to real quick double back to that. But first, I want to get your kind of key takeaways from week 1. Right? You had 3 practices. They started camp last week. They reported. They went through all the hype and the hoopla of the beginning. You went through that from your side, getting the credential and all those different things that you had to do. Just kind of your overall takeaways as we move into week number 2 of camp. Kevin Patullo spoke on Saturday. I didn't really get a chance to ask you about that on our Saturday show, but just kind of your takeaways of what you've seen so far, week 1 of training camp for this team kicking off the 2025 season.
Yeah, well, I go back to what Nick said day 1. Camp is camp. When he said, "What's the difference? You won the Super Bowl." And he said, "Camp is camp." And I said, "You know what? Camp is camp." It's got a very familiar feel, especially in the ramp-up period, as I said. before the pads come on. So from that part, it's just sort of business as usual. And then, you bringing up Kevin Patullo, it's interesting. I think people who watched him and didn't tune out because it was the weekend, which I've been saying, he's going to be a lot better when it comes to speaking than any of the Eagles coordinators in the past, in the Nick Sirianni era. He's more open. He's a better communicator. And I shouldn't say that. Like Shane was just very guarded on the podium. So behind the scenes, he was very engaging, had a good personality. But a lot of guys feel uncomfortable because they're not the head coach, especially when the head coach is an offensive guy, to speak out of turn. Kevin's so close to Nick Sirianni, he feels very comfortable doing things like that. So I think that's going to be a positive for the fan base. Now, I put that on X, and, of course you get the couple, whats who are, I don't care what, he's a good communicator. If this offense is shitty, we're going to tear them apart. Well, yeah, you did that last year. But maybe you should think about, easing back a little bit, because even as talented as the Eagles were on offense, and obviously they have stars all over the place, it's not going to be seamless. There's going to be issues. There's going to be adversity. But obviously they're in a better position than most with the talent that they bring to the table.
So far, so good, though, on that offensive side, Johnny Mac. We'll see. Moving in, John, to this week, you mentioned pads either today or tomorrow. That's going to be an exciting thing. I would expect tomorrow, just based on what you said with the history of the team. But what's on the agenda for today is, I believe, Nick Sirianni set to speak before practice, so kind of reset and back to the head coach.
Yeah, it sort of rotates, and then you'll throw in Michael Clay in there at some point. So it rotates between the coordinators and the head coach, and it's Nick's day today. So we'll get his first impressions of what's going on. I'm sure he'll downplay and talk about pads coming on for offensive, defensive line. Same thing I just said. And the competitions, which – nothing's really cleared itself up, not that it should. I find it, amusing to think that people might assume that somebody might win a job before the pads ever come on. But, you would have preferred probably a better start from Keely Ringo or, Andrew Makuba, guys who they clearly want to win the jobs.
Yeah.
And
I think Ringo's the bigger deal there, John. Just my thought process. It feels like Ringo's the bigger deal there going into year 3. Makuba is obviously a rookie,
Yeah, for whatever reason. It's interesting because I feel better probably about the backup from Ringo than the safety situation. Right. And mainly because we just saw it with Bryce Huff. I don't necessarily think that Sidney Brown is a fit for what Vic likes. And I'm not sure, that Drew can be ready for, meaningful play week 1. But, he might have to be. Sometimes you got to throw guys out there before they're ready if that's your best option. So I'm a little bit more concerned about safety simply because I think if in the worst case scenario, a Jordy Jackson could step in and be a competent player. And I don't think you're going to have many issues from that standpoint. But obviously the Eagles want Ringo and his upside if he can start to click a little bit.
Yeah, I'm interested to see Adoree Jackson. I mean, I know he's older than what we have on this defense, but it's not like he's that old. I wonder if he wins that job, maybe he cuts himself out a role here in Philly for the next couple of years. We will see and follow along that. John, I want to go to Jiad Campbell for a second and talk about that. He was projected out until some point in August after his shoulder surgery, which we all know we talked about all summer, especially after Vic's comments. Day 1, he was limited. Day 2, there was a phrase out there from one of your beat reporters, sprinting like a gazelle. Day 3, he got his first set of first-team reps. John, he's way ahead of schedule. What did you see from Jiad Campbell, and what's the expectation on him moving forward? It seems to be much further along, John, than we anticipated. Now, maybe I'm overstepping it, but what's your thought on Jiad Campbell as he continues to progress in camp?
Well, he's definitely much further along. I mean, he wasn't supposed to be practicing, so from that standpoint, the fact that he's out there, even though it's on a limited basis and he's on a rep count, yeah, I mean, he's definitely further along than everybody expected, including Vic Fangio, who made that joke about the training staff liking to understate and overachieve, which was a great line. But, yeah, so certainly, I mean, he wasn't supposed to be out there, so he's out there. So, yeah, he's way ahead. And you can see the athleticism. And I should say, you know, a couple guys saw that he took first-team reps. I didn't even see it, so it wasn't noticeable. It wasn't like many, you know.
Right.
I always
it wasn't like he was rotating in there.
No. And the vast majority, 100%, were have been Zach Bone and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Now, if it continues to progress like it is, yeah, he's gonna be a day one starter. That's why they drafted him. He is a tremendous athlete. He was on the podium, and I got to see him up close. I will say, and I mentioned this on Saturday.
Yeah.
His injured arm. He had shoulder surgery, so it's not
it's
his
the
arm.
Left side, right, John? His left shoulder.
Yeah, it's his left shoulder. His right arm is significantly bigger than his left arm right now, because you could tell he hasn't been able to work out his left arm for.
You mean physically? You mean from a muscle mass standpoint?
Yes, exactly. Because you have if you have surgery and you can't work something out, you have a little bit of atrophy.
Yeah,
you got to get that back.
It's very common, John. And you'll injure a left leg, your right leg gets stronger. You injure a left shoulder, your right. You know what I mean? It's very common.
Exactly. So, and it was pretty noticeable. So, you know, I think, you know, he's way ahead of schedule, but it's one of those things. So is Nakobe, but it's one of those things where, you know, he's going to be, you know, they're going to keep a snap count on him, a rep count, because he's still working back from a physical perspective of surgery. So, but, you know, it's still early. It's not even August. And he's out there, so he's got plenty of time, and he's going to keep building and getting better and better. And I think it would be a surprise at this point if he's not the starter opposite Zach Bond week one.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that all progresses. That's an interesting tidbit, though, on the arms, because, you know, and you just pointed it out again. It's one thing to be ready. It's another thing to have your body physically acclimated to take on the competition in the NFL. We'll see, but I'm very excited about where Jiad Campbell is, John. So compared to where we expected him to be, as you pointed out, was much further along. John, let's move into the defensive back battles. I also want to talk about Jordan Davis as well, so we'll talk a little bit about him. But you just spoke about the cornerback 2 battle a little bit. Kelee Ringo, kind of up and down. Now, you only got to see 3 of the 4 days. So 2 of the 3 days that you saw, Adoree Jackson was the first team rep. Now, maybe Ringo got it on the walkthrough. I don't know. It feels like Adoree Jackson's going to win that job. I don't know why. It just feels like that's a more a veteran presence that Vic is going to default to. And I like the way you pointed it out, John. I think after day 1 it's not that Ringo doesn't have the ability. It's that he doesn't yet know how to play the position, and it will be easy for Vic to default to the guy who does and who has the experience. How do you see that cornerback 2 battle shaping up?
Yeah, well, I definitely don't think it's over by any stretch of the imagination. As I said, before they even do day 1 in pads, I mean, that's one of the things with Ringo as well. He's his big physical corner who's very aggressive and can help and run support and do the things that a lot of times people don't think about. There's very few 6'2". You know, Adoree was talking to us and he was joking. He thinks he's 220 because he's such a big guy. and it's rare at the cornerback position.
Right.
And it's rare that somebody can run a sub 4.4 at that size. But
John, does that make some of those limitations real? Like, you hear people talk about all the time. He doesn't flip the hips, and like I've always hated that phrase, but I understand that it is a thing for corners. I've never seen any evidence of him not being able to do it, but does that size and that frame play into something like that where it could actually get in the way, fundamentally of his ability to play the position at the highest of high levels?
Well, usually if you're that big, you're not fast, and he is. That's why he's sort of a unicorn. That's usually the biggest problem with those guys.
Well, being fast is one thing, but being quick a whole nother beast. Where you can flip the hips. As people say.
Well, sure. I think that's become sort of a narrative for whatever reason. I think somebody said it, that just a bunch of other people said it, and I don't know where it started. But yeah, I mean, he's not that. That's why you don't see a lot of tall guys playing nickel, because it's more about short area quickness and things like that. But outside corner, no, I mean that's what they want. They want length and they want speed, and he's got both significant, traits from that standpoint. And again, early in camp when he's gotten beaten, except for one play against Terrace Marshall, he's been there. He's been good in coverage. What he hasn't been able to do is locate the football and make the play at the catch point. So that's a very big part of it, but that's not technique. That's not understanding how to play the position. Well, it's a little bit technique from the standpoint of you got to pick up the football earlier.
Right.
But from the standpoint of hips and footwork, that's not the issue. And if he continues to struggle at the catch point, he's not going to play. So, I mean, to me, if he can improve that part of it, he's going to play. And if he can't, Adoree Jackson's going to be the starter.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll be following along that battle all training camp long as we roll into week number 2 here on for Eagles training camp. Practice number 4 today. Johnny Mack will be down there at the NovaCare Complex. Nick Sirianni is set to speak before practice today. John, continuing to roll through safety battle. We talked Sidney Brown. We've talked Andrew Makuba. Cooper DeJean is getting some spots some reps at the safety position in base. Reed Blankenship is your steady Eddie back there right now. John, Andrew Makuba, he looks small to me, and I don't think that's a reason to not play him or that shows that he can't do it. But just from the eye, I see a picture of him, even the picture of him walking out onto the field. I'm just like, that dude looks small, and I don't want to put a ceiling on what the player can be, but you're up close and personal to him. What are you seeing so far from Andrew Makuba in his first couple days of training camp as a rookie?
Yeah, there's a lot of small safeties. Buda Baker for years has been, a tremendous player. Is, at least from a height standpoint, is certainly undersized. So you can overcome some of those things. And Drew's a good athlete, tremendous athlete, good coverage safety. That's what Vic wants. But it really hasn't. There was one play where Dallas Goedert was really playing basketball, boxing him out over the middle of the field, and you really saw that size issue and what it could be against some of the better tight ends in the NFL. Now, again, he's just starting to learn, so he's going to have to understand how to play with those size deficiencies. And as I've said, plenty of other players have done it. If you look at the biggest safety in football, if you want to go all the way back to a Cam Chancellor or somebody like that, it was just a monster. They're still smaller than the biggest tight ends, than the smallest tight ends, really, for the most part. Now it's shifted a little bit. You have more glorified flex receivers. Well, when you have a real tight end like Dallas Goedert, it can show up, and it did show up on the practice field, but that's what practice is for. And he's going to have to figure out how to deal with those types of players, or it's going to be an issue. But Yeah, it's a problem. I would say safety. To me, Sidney Brown's ahead. He's the better player, but again, I don't think he's a fit for what Vic wants. But you might have to use him. You can't. That's the thing. And Vic's been around long enough to understand. Certainly, you don't have your perfect player at every position at every moment.
Right.
And you got to use what you have to the best of the ability. And to me, that's probably from early indications Sidney Brown, but plenty of time to get Drew Makuba up to speed and plenty of time to improve. And they're going to default to Drew Makuba if that improvement comes over the summer.
Yeah, John, I wonder. It's like a what hill do you want to die on if you're Vic? Like can you live with the deficiencies of Makuba because he does what you want him to do a little better, or do you live with the deficiencies of Sidney Brown, who doesn't play the exact type of defense you want to play, but is technically or would in theory be a better, a more talented player at this stage of their careers? It's going to be interesting to see what Vic goes to there.
Yeah, and that to me is, I was thinking about, all right, what about the players lost? Who is the most glaring, at least on the field so far? And again, it's tough to register with the defensive line. So, but Jelix has looked good. Morrow's looked good. The toughest one to replace, at least on the field, not off the field, but on the field, probably going to be CJ.
We'll see what happens there. Johnny Mac, you brought up the Budda Baker thing. I've heard that a lot, man. Even amongst the fans. Oh, he's the same size as Budda Baker, and I'm like,
by the way, he's not the same size. He's the same height.
Same, right? That's literally exactly where I was going. I'm like, he might be as tall as him, but Budda Baker is built like an NFL player. I don't see that yet with Makuba. And sometimes, John, this is very common in the NFL. It takes dudes a little bit to get, I call it their NFL ready body. You know what I mean? One of the best examples I always think of is TJ Edwards back in the day, who came in not very big, and by the time he was starting linebacker a couple years later, he was built. Same with Nakobe Dean, who's put on a significant amount of size since he got drafted. I kind of see the same with Makuba. He does not have that muscle needed yet to be comped to Budda Baker, but we'll see if he can add that on. I think he should be able to, but that might take a bit, John. When you're a built athletic dude, man, people think it's easy to put on 15 pounds of muscle. It's really not. It takes some significant time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal with the NFL at every position. They call it, functional football strength. And when you get in an NFL weight room and an NFL strength and conditioning program, you're expected to make strides, and that's everywhere, even with big guys. Even with somebody like Ty Robinson, they'll put together a plan that says, all right, maybe you're a little bit too bulky. We want you to increase your dexterity and things like that. In the case of Jelix Hunt, everybody's got their specially designed smoothies from the sports science department. He was told to add weight in the off season. He sent his smoothies down to where he was training in Houston. That's everybody, from the smallest guys to the biggest guy. Right. Jordan Davis was flat out told to lose weight. That's part of the reason, might have been the condition to pick up the option to get under 340. And he managed to get down to 330. So everybody's got that sort of specific plan. And everybody, when they hit the league, in frustrations with the draft. A lot of people think you draft a good or a bad player, and this guy's great and this guy stinks, and that's it. Player development is real, and the Eagles have been one of the best at it. And part of player development is that physical in that process they go through to get the players up to speed from what they want from them from a body standpoint.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it all develops. Getting ready for day 4 of practice here for the Eagles training camp. Looking forward to that. John, last couple questions. You mentioned Jordan Davis there. I'm very optimistic on JD coming into the year. I know there's obviously still a little bit of gray area in what his role is going to be, what he's going to be asked to do. But overall, I thought it was a great start, the way he looked coming into training camp. And I got big optimism coming into the year for Jordan Davis. I think they want him to be more. I think they've asked him to be more. And so far, it seems that he's done the work on his end to be prepared to take on more. What'd you see from Jordan Davis in week 1 as we head into week 2 here?
Yeah, I think he's a pass guy. He's going to show up more. He's a very good player. I feel like the tide has shifted, at least on our show, where I was defending Jordan Davis for years, and now I think people are expecting a little bit too much out of him because he lost a little bit of weight. He's definitely going to play more. And Vic has made that pretty consistently. You know, replacing Milton Williams isn't about one player. It's going to be spread out. And he mentioned Jordan, he mentioned Morrow, and he mentioned even Ty Robinson as sort of, you know, splitting those reps. So everybody's going to have to play more. But I still think when you talk about situational football, which is what the Eagles are good at and emphasize, you know, if it's 3rd and long, it's going to be a Jomo and Carter if they're healthy. And it should be. That's what fans should want. But he's definitely going to have to play more, and I think he's prepared for it. I think he's always been a good player. But for those obsessed with sacks, he's never going to be a big sack guy.
No. We'll see how
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll see how Jordan Davis continues to develop here. John, last couple questions here for you as we head into day 4. What are you looking for, John, going into day 4, week number 2 of training camp, kicking off today on a Monday morning? What are you looking for, Johnny Mac, heading out there today?
Well, coming off the first player's day off, you know, sometimes it's a reboot day, so sometimes you'll see some changes on the depth chart. You know, it'll be interesting to see if, you know, the backside of Morrow Ajomo having a very good Saturday was that Tyler Steen didn't have a very good Saturday. So, you know, did the Eagles coaches watch that film and say, all right, let's start to give Matt Pryor some first-team reps?
Yeah.
So things like that can happen. Maybe they say, you know what, Adore's playing better. Let's give him more first-team reps. Maybe they say, you know, let's scale back a little bit on Drew Makuba, or it might go the opposite direction and say, we need more reps. We need more reps because he's got to get better and better and better. So sometimes you see some of that rebooting after a day off. So that's number 1. Well, actually, number 1 is pads. We'll see if they put the pads on or not. Again, I'm guessing Tuesday because that's the history. That's generally the history. But again, the weather could play into it because it's going to be 100 tomorrow. So they might say, well, do we really want to put them through that? And it's at least a little bit better today. So that could factor into it as well. So that's number 1.
Yep, no doubt about it. Johnny Mac, great stuff today. One thing that I want to see, John, and I'm not there, so I'm going to have to ask you to be my eyeballs. I want to see if Jiad Campbell gets more first-team reps today. You said you didn't see him, and that makes me a little weary, John. You're normally my voice of truth, and if you didn't see it, does it even count? I don't know, so I want you to let me know.
Well,
if you see
no, I enough guys that I trust saw it, but
okay.
we're talking like 1 or 2 snaps. So it might have been. That's the thing. I mean, somebody might have had to go to the bathroom. You know, these
right.
things are. You know,
yeah, right.
Is somebody, you know, there could be a little of an equipment thing, and you're going, you want those reps to keep going.
Yeah, right.
You know,
Trotter had to tie his shoe, John. Trotter had to tie his shoe, and Campbell got it out there.
Exactly. It could be as simple as that. So until they're meaningful and he's taking a full set of reps, then I think it becomes. And by the way, that's coming. I don't think there's any doubt that it's coming. But then I think it becomes more relevant than just, you know, a snap or 2 here or there, which, again, could have been because of circumstance.
Yep. Good stuff, Johnny Mac. John, final question. What do you want to hear from Nick Sirianni this morning? Any questions on your mind, John? If you get the baton first, is there something you really want to get out of Nick Sirianni in today's press conference before the practice?
I don't want the baton first because I'm interested in the underneath stuff. So, and that's not stuff you start with. So, you know.
All right. Give me an example though of some underneath stuff you're interested in right now.
Well, A.J. Dillon is a guy who I did not think would be as relevant as he has been early. And that's when before the pads have even come on. So that's been very interesting to me, and I want to hear Nick's take on that. And that's not the first question he asked in the press conference. I'll leave the Jalen Hurts stuff for the randos, but Jalen, we don't even talk about Jalen that much because he's been so consistent, so solid, and they picked it up a little bit on Saturday. They were throwing down the field a little bit more, so it wasn't quite as impressive as the 95% completion percentages,
right.
But that's what happens when I made the comparison on Saturday, a layup versus, a three-pointer. You're going to miss more three-pointers than layups. So that's just part of it.
Yep,
I've arrived at the NovaCare complex.
There we go, baby. The voice of Jacob is in the building. Johnny Mac, have a good day, brother. We will talk to you later on today on our full edition of Birds 365. Well done today, sir. Take in that practice and give us all the updates after. We appreciate you doing it, John.
All right, thanks all.
All right, there's Johnny Mac, John McMullen right here on a morning edition of Football 24/7. All right, I might change that name. Just start making it Emergency Birds 365. You get the same two hosts. Come on, used to be one of our shows back in the day, Football 24/7. But anyway, great stuff from Johnny Mac there on the opening today, kicking off the week number 2 here for the Birds. A lot of optimism.